to all of you. I'm glad to be back here with our weekly Satsangs. Sometimes one independent theme, sometimes a theme which stretches over 1, 2, 3 weeks, depending on the subjects which we have in that period of time, most active, most stringent in the school. We, for example, until this spring, we have spent a lot of time with commenting on the Gospel of Luke from the Bible, the words and teachings of Jesus, the symbols which can be explained in a yogic manner from what Jesus was teaching and saying. And then we have had a lot of other small topics, satsangs, very important, some of them, but just taking 1 week or one session. There are plenty of those on our channels out there on YouTube and the others. Now recently I hear there is an audio channel which contains many of these recordings. And now this winter, almost starting a new season, I wished to move to another yoga text. Approximately 6 years ago or more, I made a commentary on one of the most fundamental Hatha yoga texts, the Gheranda Samhita, which has the reputation that it is the text of Hatha yoga which gives most number of asanas, mudras, bandhas, pranayamas, and so on. It gives, for example, a list of 32 fundamental asanas. Basically, what I'm trying to say here is that the tradition which Agama is teaching, we always start with the help of the bodywork, working into spirituality and working into yoga with the help of the body. Theoretically, you don't absolutely need the body. You could do yoga just by sitting on a chair like this, and then the teacher gives you indications, and everything is based on the concentration of the mind, on the attention, on the process of resonance, on the amplification of energies through the process of resonance, and then you could basically start producing effects in your chakras, in your channels of energy, in your body, and in your subtle bodies, in your emotional body, in your mental body, and so on and so forth. However, while this is theoretically possible, and we have many spiritualists who did not use their body, like in many forms of Christian prayer, or in many forms of Islamic mysticism, or in many forms of Buddhist spirituality, and others. Nevertheless, it has been found out by the yogis approximately 2,000 years ago, maybe 15 centuries ago, that by using the body, you have a much better chance. The process is accelerated a lot. Until today, the existence of subtle energies, including the very near to physical body energies, which are located in the etheric body, so the pranamaya kosha, as we call it technically in yoga, they are widely contested. It is, even the acupuncture is partly considered to be a pseudoscience and a pseudotherapy, simply because modern science has not yet found a way to demonstrate crushingly, like scientifically to the core, to demonstrate the existence of the etheric energy, which in yoga we call prana, and which in China, in the Chinese medicine, they call it qi, like in the famous word Tai Chi and others, or which in Japan is called Ki, like in Aikido or others. And therefore, we live in an age of ignorance. Actually, Kali Yuga, compared with 100 years ago or 200 years ago, Kali Yuga has become deeper, and the humanity, in spite of its advanced knowledge of microbes and chemicals and chemotherapy and a million other things, is actually splitting the hair concerning atoms and molecules and physical particles, and no scientific research is properly oriented in the direction of discovering the subtle energies. Today, if you go on a platform like Wikipedia and many others, the concept of prana or chi is considered to be imaginary. It's a figment of some people's imagination. We are at that level. What to speak about the astral body? What to speak about the mental body? What to speak about causal, or convergence of space and time, and what to speak about spirituality in the bigger realm. Really, humanity, compared to the time of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika or compared to the time of Buddha himself, humanity is at a bitter level of ignorance. While we have color television and internet, and it seems we are so knowledgeable that we fly with reactors and all that, nevertheless, the degree of actual ignorance of humanity has increased. We know less about the real essential things of the universe compared to our ancestors. And that is why, remember that this story with the very energy that many people read about Agama, and when they read beyond the lies and all sorts of the negative propaganda which exists against Agama, they find out that Agama is doing a relevant, interesting, powerful form of yoga, is teaching a yoga which makes you circulate energy through your body, through your channels, through your chakras, and that energy is not just having some energetical effects, but it also influences your emotions, your mind, and other much deeper aspects. It can include, as you will see in the workshop about the power of manifestation, it can include even changes in people's karma or destiny, energies of destiny. And that's why what I'm trying to say here is, on one hand, this concept with energy is very intuitive, very deep, and many people can feel that's the way of going deeper. And on the other hand, it's classified as pseudoscience. I remember one of our students who went to California, and because she told to the doctor that she had a lot of emotional problems, and then she made the mistake to say that she did some yoga, and the doctor said, oh, so you feel like you have an aura of energy surrounding your body? And she said, yeah, well, we all do. And then the doctor simply stamped her schizophrenia. You're schizophrenic because you think you have an aura and you think you can feel it. But then all the yogis of history and a lot of mystics and shamans and spiritualists from Buddhist, Christianity, and others, they have all been schizophrenic. And that's not true, because we know that they had amazing behavior, amazing energy. They had more moral and ethical and mental health than most of the people who lived around them. And therefore, we have here one of the big complexes of our time. Because on one hand, we think we have more knowledge, and our smartphones tend to demonstrate that. But on the other hand, we live in a more bitter ignorance as far as Buddha defines knowledge and ignorance. And therefore, when you come to yoga, one of the things which happens if you do yoga properly is that you will start feeling seeing, hearing the invisible energies. First, the ones immediately next to the physical body. First, the etheric energies. And then after that, if you practice yoga for more time, perhaps the astral energies, then the mental energies, then the spiritual causal energies. It's a process which takes time, but it always starts with the first step. And the first step is feeling some energies which are just together with your flesh and bones, with your physical body. Those energies, again, for modern science, they are a huge stumbling stones. I could talk about this a whole satsang, 3 satsangs in a row. I could talk about how much of a big problem this is, and I could show you how big the ignorance is and how amazing the evidences and the lack of evidence is concerning this. We are at a war, and the yogis, together with other great spiritualists, they claim that this war is produced by the negative karma of people. The planet has a karma of ignorance, and people are simply hypnotized in staying ignorant, in staying focused only on the physical things which surround them, without understanding anything about an energy and a set of multiple energies that surrounds us and participates into nature, into the universal reality. That's why when you start studying yourself, many people will say, but I want to study my emotions, but I want to study my mind. The mind, according to yoga, is the body number 4, Vijnana Maya Kosha. The emotions, the states of mind, the states of spirit, they are the body number 3, the Manomaya Kosha. And therefore, many people would like to skip directly to more advanced things without taking good care of the physical body and this great mystery, the great hypnotic blackout, the second body, the Pranamaya Kosha, the body of the life force or the energy. According to Hatha Yoga, the traditional Hatha Yoga, the authentic Hatha Yoga, not this monkey-like gymnastics which so many millions of people do in the West today, and they call it yoga, which is just a stretching, a fitness, a gymnastics, a calisthenics, and a contortionism, and it's not the authentic yoga. You are going to see what authentic yoga means in the creators, in the language of the creators of yoga, because yoga was not invented by me or by one of my teachers or by somebody 50 years ago. Yoga is coming from the centuries, from the millennia, and there are extraordinary sources like the one which we want to tackle tonight, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, one of the fundamental texts of this tradition. And when you see how they present the issue, what is their angle to this, then you understand that what you learn in Agama might be the real deal, and what you learn in many other places might be just a watered down version, if a version of the truth at all. So basically what I'm trying to say here, it's this. Yoga could be done sitting on a chair, but it has been noticed in the last 2000 years that people sitting on a chair and trying to do yoga and succeeding, they will be 1 in a million. Maybe less than that. Like you need some people who, before starting yoga, they were considered oversensitive, almost hysterical. Some people would go as far as proclaiming them autistic or something like this, because they could already feel and be very sensitive, and they could not explain what they felt, and they could not do much about it, and therefore people classify them as weirdos or freaks. Because, and then such people, if they have the grace of encountering a teacher in authentic yoga, they close their eyes, they do some things, and then they notice that they can control this strange universe which they felt all their lives, and then they start understanding that it had a meaning and it actually is something outstanding. I met people endowed with clairvoyance who thought that they were half crazy, and when they met a yoga teacher and they joined their yoga classes for 6 months, they blossomed completely because they understood that what they considered partial insanity or weirdness before that, it was actually a very natural process of the chakras, of the energies, of the 5 bodies, and of all that, and that they could control it, they could tap it, they could use it for practical purposes, and all those things. And that's why I'm saying when people come to Agama Yoga, they notice that the first way for us to teach them about how to feel these energies, even the first level, the next ones, the pranic body, the second body, we do it by using the body, by pushing the body, bending it, placing it in some apparently odd positions, breathing in certain ways, and other such tricks or technologies. Those people notice that they can start feeling something. It has a pattern. It is repeatable. They can produce effects which are visible, effects both in their physical body and effects both in their emotional and mental body. And then the people gain confidence in these things. Thus, please remember that there is a huge amount of skepticism out there, and in the moment when you engage in developing the spiritual practice, there are 3 possibilities. 1, you get hypnotized by the skepticism of 90% of the people on this planet and more, who believe in Wikipedia and in the skeptics, in the scientific skeptics out there. And then those people will try to do yoga, ignoring the very essence of yoga, like they will try to do it as a gymnastics for fitness. That's the tragedy of yoga in the modern times, that most people have relegated yoga to a sort of aerobics number 2 or something, a sort of alternative to aerobics or something, or stretching. The second possibility is the correct one, that you do yoga in a good environment, you learn exactly the ups and lows, the pluses and minuses, and you learn to feel, become aware, control, conduct, focus, amplify these energies at will, and then you are capable of producing effects. I will agree, not everybody who comes to a yoga course does reach greatness. In Agama Yoga, there were times when 100 people were coming at a time to learn about yoga and about these skills. How many of them in the last 20 years or 30 years, how many of them have become yogis of the size of Shivananda or Mahanandamayi or Ramakrishna? Almost none. Therefore, many are called and few are chosen according to the laws of spirituality, and I'm not saying it's an easy path. And there is a third possibility, which I mentioned and which I didn't detail, which is that some people move too quickly. They have a strange belief. There are, for example, psychoactive substances, such as the psychoactive substances contained in marijuana, in cannabis, which today and in the last 50 years, they have become extremely popular in the West. The consumption of marijuana and its derivatives is huge, huge, huge. Like the number of tons Just study the statistics of the police and of the governments, and you will see that the population consumes, I don't know, thousands of tons of marijuana per year. No? And because of this, one of the effects of marijuana, as evidenced by the homeopathic medicine, is that marijuana produces an effect which is called credulousness. Like the people who use cannabis and cannabinoids, they start believing in everything. If you tell them that their life is ruled by some little green men who live on Mars or who have a spaceship hidden behind the moon, they believe it and they start feeling it. It produces a sort of a self-hypnosis, self-suggestion, in which people start believing whatever they want to believe, and they can make themselves believe in absurdities. When you study the so-called spiritual world of today, with all the channeling people and all the weird beliefs, all the new religions, in 1995 in Los Angeles, there were registered 4 new religions every day. In America, in one city, one of the wildest cities, it's true, they were registering 30 years ago. What happened afterwards is probably much, much, much bigger than that. They were registering more than 1,000 new religions per year in one city. That is the effect of cannabis. That's the effect of marijuana. That people can believe in whatever thing or person or strange statement, and because of that, there is this, that 90% of these neo-religions and neo-spiritualities, what is called New Age today, is actually completely baloney. Completely. No, because people don't really feel or see, but they claim that they do feel or see or realize a lot of things. I remember going to a New Age festival somewhere in Copenhagen many years ago with a friend who was an engineer and a very, very, a very successful engineer, very rich and everything, making money from engineering. And after we went half an hour through that festival, New Age festival, alternative thing, I saw that his face was getting more and more worried. No? And then he was getting worried because I had brought him there, and he was thinking what kind of person I may be secretly if I brought him there. No? And then after half an hour, he didn't resist. And he just pulled me by the arm in a corner and he said, listen, I hope you realize that 95% of the things which we see around here, they are totally baloney. And I clapped him on the shoulder and I said, Finn, don't worry. I know perfectly well. I also have been educated as an engineer, and I can see that most of these people imagine. They live in a world of fantasy, and that they imagine. There were people who had built some pipelines out of copper. They created a sort of a Christmas star out of it, and they all call it the Stargate, because they had just been the Kurt Russell movie in the Hollywood called Stargate or something like this, And just 2 years later, people had built themselves a copper Stargate through which they were getting energy from the Ursa Minor or whatever, inspiring them spiritually. That energy which they were getting, and they could swear by it, it had 0 physical effects. It had effects only through self-suggestion and self-hypnosis, like placebo. It did have 40% effects because placebo does have 40% effects through self-suggestion, but it was not real in the engineering on scientific way. What I'm trying to tell right now in this big argumentation, which I give you in the beginning of this satsang, and in the beginning of our studying a fundamental Hatha Yoga text, is actually the fact that the human being is surrounded and accompanied by multiple levels of energy, but by many types of energy, hierarchically stratified in what is called koshas or bodies, the 5 bodies, or according to some people, even the 7 bodies of the human being. And these energies, you can start feeling them, being aware of them, controlling them, conducting them, focusing them, amplifying them, and doing a lot of things with them. But it is also possible that if you use a marijuana method, you may simply imagine that you do so and make yourself live in a world of complete fantasy where this will not work. That's why it is important to have a reality check, and the first thing in this reality check is the body work. In the moment when you do 100 Uddiyana bandhas, you have all the reality check which you want in Hatha Yoga, in Kundalini Yoga, in Laya Yoga, and all those. Many people doing yoga, they made instrumental measurements, like the French doctor Thérèse Brosse. She got her PhD in medicine in the 1950s, going to Lonavla, to the yoga hospital, and studying there in India real yogis who could even stop their heart, stop their breathing process, do a lot of unexpected things which she documented scientifically in her PhD. So therefore, what I'm trying to say is, we in Agama think that if we don't teach you yoga with the body, then either you will never get to feel the energies and you will never reach to a deeper level of your practice, or you will start imagining that you feel the energies and you will get in some balloony land, in some la-la land, where you imagine that you can feel something, but actually you may go into insanity, like by imagining the whole life that you talk with a spaceship hidden behind the moon or something. In the end, when you die, you will say, I have been gaga all my life, and actually I have wasted my life by just imagining absurd things. That's why here in Agama, we think, and it is the fruit of my own experience and the fruit of experiences of so many generations of students, that in the moment when you want to start to study spirituality, yoga is a splendid instrument, and especially it should be Hatha Yoga. It should be yoga with the body, because the body has an incredible advantage. It's practical, it's pragmatical, it's physical, it's obvious. If you can't do things with your body, then how do you expect to do things with your mind? No? So in this way, here in Agama, for us, the tradition of Hatha Yoga is a stepping stone. It's a landmark in working with yourself. I very seldom in my life have met people who could feel energies, who could feel subtle bodies, who could do things with their mind and more, and who had not started in this life with their physical body, by working on the physical body. Only a minority of 1 person in a million who came with karma, with samskaras from previous lives, and who are endowed with various forms of clairvoyance or paranormal sensitivity, and sometimes they didn't know what to make out of those. They were sometimes even scared of those things, considering them a weird thing, a freak thing in their lives. Only a few such people were able to start without building it up from the body. It doesn't mean you have to stay with it forever, depending on your purposes, as you are going to see that Hatha Yoga Pradipika itself says. I met people who did this Hatha yogic things for 2-3 years. They became very awakened in their energies. They were very sensitive and they had a very accurate mind and concentration of the mind. And I remember when I was young and starting on this path, I asked one of those people who had a form of clairvoyance already acquired through his yoga practice and so on, and I asked him, how much Hatha Yoga do you do every day? Because for me, Hatha Yoga was Alpha and Omega. I was doing it hours every day. And he said, somewhere between 10 to 30 minutes per day. My eyes bulged out like, are you not doing yoga? Oh, he said, I'm doing other types of yoga, not Hatha Yoga, because now I can feel my chakras, I can feel my energies, I can move my energy like this. My mind is very clear and all of that. And therefore, I do Hatha Yoga just to eliminate some blockages, just to acquire a little bit of physical vitality, just to purify myself, maybe when I have stagnant energies, but for the rest, I don't need it for what I want to do. Therefore, we don't consider it Alpha and Omega, but definitely it's Alpha. It's the first letter of the alphabet. It is the beginning of everything. That's why all those of you who will come to Agama, if you have exceptional abilities and you can fly through the air, please tell it to your teacher so that they spare you of Hatha Yoga if you don't need it, because maybe you don't need it. But otherwise, 99.9% of the people, they need to do a few years of Hatha Yoga at least, so that they can get to a level of working with the chakras easily, with mantras, with visualization, with colors, in kinesthetic ways, by Laya Yoga, by summoning up the resonance of the energy, which are all things which you will learn in the Agama lore. But again, first of all, you start with Hatha Yoga. Given the fact that Hatha Yoga is so prostituted nowadays that it became this ridiculous monkey gymnastics, which people do, and they nickname it Hatha Yoga, because of this, we in Agama, we consistently point to anybody who wants to listen to this, that the Hatha Yoga tradition is not invented by us or by some teacher last century. Hatha Yoga is popular, it has become part of the tradition at least 15 centuries ago, and parts of it were known even before that time. And therefore, Hatha Yoga is a monumental tradition, old as the trees and as the hills. It's not our invention, and we have been fortunate enough to get this tradition in its authentic form, according to the tradition, according to the fundamental texts. That's why one thing is for sure. You want to learn Hatha Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, Laya Yoga, and all these energy forms of yoga, you'd better come to Agama or some equivalent school. There are not many in this world when you can learn these things properly. It is for this reason that a number of years ago, I wanted to comment the most engineering-like of those texts of yoga, the last one, produced somewhere in the 18th century, maybe 17th century. The scholars have not yet managed to agree. The timelines are extremely difficult to unravel in India because of the way the Indian history is written. And because of that, I made a commentary on a little text. They are all of them not very big. A little text, some 300, 400 shlokas, called Geranda Samhita, which is the repertory, the yoga repertoire of Yogi Geranda. It bears the same name. Well, there are two more, and God willing, I will make a commentary on all three of them in this lifetime. And the second, which I decided to approach in this autumn or winter, it's already December, so technically, calendar-wise, it's winter already. We don't feel it here in Thailand, but it's theoretically winter. And in this December, I am starting with the second of them, a text of approximately 400 shlokas, again, divided in 4 or 5 chapters according to different standards. You'll understand what I mean by that. And this text has the most obvious name. It's called Hatha Yoga Pradipika. While Hatha Yoga is the name of this yoga, which works with the body, with the energy, with the chakras, with the channels of energy, with the 5 bodies, and with all that, Pradipika is a very strange word because Dipika means light, originally in Sanskrit, and Pradipika means little light, which is translated usually as a lamp. Dipika is more like the light of the sun, and Pradipika is more like the light produced by a lamp or a candle, an oil lamp or something like this. That's why the name of it is Little Light on Hatha Yoga. The author is very modest. He doesn't say, I will give you the alpha and omega of Hatha Yoga, listen to me. He just says, I want to shed a little light on Hatha Yoga. He says, I want to bring you a modest contribution to the knowledge of Hatha Yoga because it is so good and it did produce so many miraculous effects in history that I am eager to do that. This text, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, according to the scholars, is produced in the 15th or 16th century. They cannot agree again exactly on the time because it's produced by a yogi called Svatmarama, and Svatmarama is not a famous historical character. It's very difficult to give the timeline of Patanjali himself. Patanjali is equated within a distance of 5 centuries. They can't decide if he lived in the 1st century by the time of Christ or if he lived at the time of Buddha. He's somewhere between Buddha and Christ. Even Patanjali cannot be located historically, and there exist several Patanjalis, not to mention that. Svatmarama is even more anonymous, so to speak, than Patanjali. Nobody really knows where Svatmarama was and where exactly he lived. They say that he may have lived in the northeastern part of India, towards Bengal or something like this, but even that is not clear. And he lived, according to the Sanskrit language and all the other technical details mentioned in his text, he is known to have lived somewhere in the 15th century. In the 15th century, India was under the rulership of the Mughal dynasties, which were all Islamic. Between the 12th century and the 18th century, when the British took over, India was ruled for 600 years by Islamic dynasties, which had been parachuted in India by the power of the Mongol Empire of Genghis Khan, who was allied with Central Asian Islamic cultures, and some of them ramified in India, branched in India, and it gave rise to the dynasties of rulers of India for 6 centuries. Islam considers that Christianity and Judaism are profoundly wrong because they did not understand the Prophet Muhammad and they did not accept him, but at least they are religions of the book, Abrahamic religions. That means they still believe in a monotheistic God and all that, and they are somehow acceptable. The Christians and the Jews, says the Quran, are apes and pigs, literally. Yeah? And therefore the Muslims consider that they have to correct those ones for their for their lack of faith. But the Hindus and the Buddhists, those are the scum of the earth because they don't even believe in the God of Abraham, in Jehovah, the God of Muhammad, he called Allah, and because of that, those religions are unacceptable completely. And the people who are Hindu or Buddhist or something, they have to be converted to Islam. So that was the policy which they had for 6 centuries in India. And because of that, everything which was Hindu, such as yoga, was underground. Svatmarama wrote this in the 15th century when India was ruled by Islamic dynasties, and Hatha Yoga, which is a very visible form of yoga because you do the shoulder stand and everybody can see that you do the shoulder stand, and then it's obvious who you are and what you do. Then there was a big secrecy about it, and this tradition was suppressed to a large extent. In the 18th century, when the British took over, it was almost dead. Naga Babas and others lived naked in the forest, but they were not much doing Hatha Yoga. Only very, very few of them were doing Hatha Yoga, and the rest, most of it were practicing Vedantic spirituality, Vedantic mysticism, and because of that, yoga in so many forms almost disappeared. It is considered first and foremost the merit of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa that he spoke openly about yoga, and he was called by Romain Rolland, the French writer, he was called the Prince of the Yogis. And in this way, yoga came back with Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, and later with many other lineages. If you study who was teaching yoga in India in 1830, just to give an absurd date, before the birth of Ramakrishna, there is no known of any great yogi in those days who made the lineages of yoga are almost extinct. And then yoga acquired universal fame through Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, and later the second step in popularizing it was, of course, due to the controversial Theosophical Society. The Theosophical Society is the first one which published a translation of Hatha Yoga Pradipika in 1905. And therefore, and it published translations of Gheranda Samhita, of Shiva Samhita, of Yoga Sutra, and many others. And this is how yoga got to the Westerners. And all the wave of popularity of yoga started at that time. Remember, before Ramakrishna, yoga was almost going extinct. And so this Hatha Yoga Pradipika is a cry in the dark of a great yogi, Svatmarama, who thinks that yoga is wonderful, that he got benefits, that his teachers and lineage got benefits. And this Svatmarama is connected with the powerful Nath Sampradaya, Natha Sampradaya, which is the lineage of Matsyendra and Goraksha. Hatha Yoga, Kundalini Yoga, Laya Yoga, all this Chakra Yoga and Energy Yoga, they have been started properly by one of the mahasiddhas called Matsyendra, later called Matsyendra Nath. All of them get a Nath in the end, like an additional title. And then the so-called Nath Sampradaya, the school of the Naths, which today is in a disarray, and they are abuser of drugs and many other things, but they started this tradition in the 5th, 6th century AD, about the same time with the Mahayana Buddhism, with some tendencies of Buddhist yoga, and with the renewal of yoga in India. In India, at that time, the new Upanishads started appearing, and these Upanishads started speaking about chakras, bindu, mantras, all sorts of things. Then, in the 7th century, the Vedanta of Shankara, but in the 8th century, the Kashmiri Shaivism of Vasugupta, they all emerged, and all these powerful traditions, they blended in the Indian history, together with the Kaula mysticism, the tantric sexual mysticism of the Kaulas, and others. That's why, to make the long story short, let's say that this Hatha Yoga Pradipika is one of the 3 most influential texts of yoga. Whenever people say, oh, you guys in Agama perhaps are not practicing yoga the right way, we have been accused of this by some wiseacre people who thought that they knew more about yoga than we do when we have practiced it for a lifetime here in Agama. We always invite those people to read First, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the Shiva Samhita, the Geranda Samhita, and then talk about yoga. Because the translations from these texts are very difficult, and 99% of the time they are made by Sanskritologists and not by people who practice in their own body these yogas. Because of this, many of these translations have a lot of difficulties and even plain errors and twists of meanings, and that's why I considered that commenting and explaining the Geranda Samhita a few years ago, and nowadays commenting, starting with tonight, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, is an act of bringing these texts and this tradition to the modern times more powerfully. Agama Yoga is a living tradition. People are doing, getting the results, and then through the agency of these satsangs, I hope I'll make people aware of the existence of these texts. In these texts, there exist also many untold secrets, and those untold secrets will not be mentioned in a satsang like this. Those are things which are explained in advanced courses here in Agama, because definitely they are not knowledge for the beginners, as you are going to see that Hatha Yoga Pradipika and Svatmarama himself, they ask specifically for us to do. We are not just practicing any secretomania or something like this. We are simply told by the tradition to go on that direction. Hatha Yoga Pradipika, mysteriously, only when it comes to asanas, which are the most visible part of yoga. Even with pranayama, you can't see really what the person is doing there, because very much is in the mind happening already. But with the asanas, at least people copy, like monkeys, this position of the body. Geranda Samhita was describing no less than 32 bodily positions. And there is a minor tradition of India which describes 84 of them, and it is quoted in the Agama courses. Well, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is supposed to be, again, the alpha and the omega of Hatha Yoga, describes actually only 16 asanas, out of which at least a quarter of them, they are postures of sitting in meditation. Therefore, they are not very much Hatha Yoga things like Siddhasana, Padmasana, and the likes of them. And thus, the interesting thing is that Hatha Yoga Pradipika, therefore, it gives us the principles, and the rest has to be taken from a guru, because there are teachers like Dhirendra Brahmachari who taught in their books 108 different physical postures, and BKS Iyengar in his Light on Yoga, which is an allusion for the connoisseurs to the Pradipika, which is called the Little Light on Yoga. And then Iyengar had taught 200 asanas, and he called it Light on Yoga, like it's much bigger than Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Unfortunately, he lost somewhere along the path exactly the diamonds from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, and he just taught the monkey part, how to bend your hips and all that. So Hatha Yoga Pradipika describes asanas, pranayamas, mudras, bandhas, and in the final chapters it describes the more subtle things, like it is the place where you find, for example, the use of the nada of the internal sound, nada anusandhana. The practice which we use in Laya Yoga here in Agama is actually described mostly here in Hatha Yoga Pradipika. It is a text which is dedicated directly to Shiva, Shiva being called Adinatha or Adinath, the first of the Naths, because the first of the Naths is not Matsyendra. Matsyendra learned yoga from Shiva. He overheard Shiva when he was talking to Parvati, which means in a technical engineering language is that he picked it up from Akasha, because Shiva didn't talk to Parvati in the 5th century. That's absurd to believe that Shiva was explaining Hatha Yoga to Parvati exactly in the century when Matsyendra lived in India. It's an out-of-time thing. It was recorded in Akasha, and Matsyendra could go in Akasha and overhear it. And this is how he brought it. And therefore, when Matsyendra, together with his main disciple Goraksha, they created the school called Nath Sampradaya, Natha, if you want, for Westerners. The Hindus don't pronounce the final A, as I said it in the Sanskrit language workshop a few days ago. And therefore, the Nath is a Hindu short for Natha, and the first of the Nath is not Matsyendra. First of the Nath is Shiva, because he actually is the origin of yoga. And therefore, Shiva is called Adinath or Adinatha, the first of the Nathas. And Matsyendra is the first physical Nath, but not, it's the second Nath in order in this way. Hatha Yoga Pradipika is a text which has more than 389 shlokas, because there are different versions of it, and some shlokas are missing in some parts. The most important part which is missing and which I want to share with you is the final chapter. Most people believe, and most editions are like this, that Hatha Yoga Pradipika has 4 chapters. It actually has 5. And the 5th chapter is super interesting and important, because the 5th chapter talks to us about the connection between Hatha Yoga and Ayurveda, and how to heal diseases and problems of the body by using Hatha Yoga and the pranic energy and this process. So it's a really down-to-earth, pragmatical, and really nice chapter. Not very long, but for some karmic reasons, most people who translated it, they couldn't find it. They found editions in Sanskrit which did not contain the 5th chapter. And you will find extremely few translations. One of the best is the one made in French by a female Sanskritologist from Pondicherry called Tara Michel. Tara Michel gave a brilliant translation of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika in French, and she gives us there, among others, the 5th chapter in its totality, and it's invaluable in this way. The Hatha Yoga Pradipika is written in shlokas, 2-liners, not in sutras, but in shlokas like Geranda Samhita and like most of the classical yoga texts. It also has a commentary which is called Jyotishna. Jyoti means light, like in Jyoti is the name for astrology. The Vedic astrology is called Jyotish, but it has a very peculiar name when you study Sanskrit, because Jyotish means moonlight. It's like the moon is giving you a little light in the night, and you can even read something under the moonlight, especially when it's full moon. And it's the clear of the moon, clair de lune, as it is called, the moonlight, again in English. And therefore, this is moonlight on the little light on Hatha Yoga. And this moonlight, Jyotishna commentary, is made by a later disciple of Svatmarama, who is called Brahmananda, and about whom, again, much is not known. But the commentary, which is rare, most books don't, for example, the 1905 translation from the Theosophical Society, performed by a fellow called Pancham Singh, it does not contain any of the commentary of Brahmananda, while other people have called the attention on it, because it is a very good commentary which clarifies some things. Therefore, I made an introduction. Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it's really, really venerable text, and it comes from the horse's mouth. If you cannot learn Hatha Yoga from Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Geranda Samhita, and Shiva Samhita, then you can never learn Hatha Yoga from nowhere. Of course, with the help of a guru, these texts are on purpose written elliptically, very briefly, so that a million details are not given, while other details are given, and therefore always a physical teacher is preferable for learning Hatha Yoga in practice. But again, if you learn any Hatha Yoga which contradicts Hatha Yoga Pradipika or Geranda Samhita or the likes of them, then you are on the wrong path. It's as simple as that. That's why it's an act of bringing the tradition back to the students of Agama and to those who will watch this, to give you a bit of Hatha Yoga Pradipika. To the moonshine on the little light of Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Swami Vivekananda Saraswati is lighting a little candle somewhere there, a little torch, to give you a little bit of actualized modern light of Hatha Yoga Pradipika and of the tradition of Hatha Yoga. I will not do much today because the introduction and the background took a lot of time, but at least I want to get started. So this is technically the first session of the shlokas. I don't think I'll manage to do more than 10 or more shlokas like this. Actually, in the shloka number 12 from chapter 1, Svatmarama starts directly with the advice of how to build a little hut for yourself, like what is the space in which you should do yoga. If you remember correctly, Geranda in Geranda Samhita did the same thing. He said you should go in a foreign land, like staying away from co-nationals and from family who will disturb you and so on. Be a foreigner somewhere, make a little hut, but it should be a country where spiritual practitioners are recognized, and therefore you will get food, so you don't have to work for your daily bread, and then stay in that place and do your yoga. In a similar way, somewhere in the shloka number 12, Svatmarama starts getting first to these down-to-earth things, like where you are, what you do, and then he's teaching you the technologies of yoga. He starts, of course, obviously, with a consecration. He says, I salute and pay homage to Lord Adinath, which is Shiva himself. He uses the word namaste, namaskar. Namaste is not only salutation, it's also, I recognize the divinity in you, the divine soul in me. So when you say Aum Shivaya Namaha, Namaha means namaste to Shiva, which means my divine soul recognizes your soul as being divine. So it's not only a salutation, it's a homage as well. I salute and pay homage to Lord Adinath, Shiva, who taught to Parvati. The name of Parvati is not mentioned, but Brahmananda mentions it because he says, to whom did Shiva teach? Shiva didn't teach it to Matsyendra. He allowed, in a state of omniscience, he allowed knowing that Matsyendra will get it and humanity will indirectly benefit from it. But actually the teaching of Shiva was to Parvati. He was teaching yoga to Parvati so that Parvati can acquire the state of samadhi and the state of cosmic consciousness. So pay homage to Lord Shiva, who taught to Parvati the science of Hatha Yoga. They all the time say Hatha Vidya or Hatha Yoga Vidya, the Vidya, the knowledge. The word used for this science is Vidya, like in Mahavidya. Yeah, it's the same. The science of Hatha Yoga, which shines forth as a stairway that leads one to the lofty heights of Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga was known from Patanjali, but they knew that people have difficulties in making it to that level of yoga. And therefore, he says, Hatha Yoga shines forth as a stairway which leads one to the lofty heights of Raja Yoga. To feel energies, to feel chakras, to see the auras of people or the tattvas of the universe, to be able to perceive the mind and hear mantra, you need to do something with the body. Hatha Yoga is the stairway, the staircase to the high level. So they acknowledge the beauty of Raja Yoga and how exalted it is, how lofty it is. But basically they say you need Hatha Yoga to climb to Raja Yoga. The same thing I tell to people about Kashmiri Shaivism. Kashmiri Shaivism is sublime. It's divine. It's the best there is, but it's up in the loft. It's up in the loft, and if you don't have a staircase, a stairway to the loft, you will talk about Kashmiri Shaivism, but you will not see it, feel it, do it. And that's why Hatha Yoga is the entrance. Agama sticks to this principle. Yes, if you want, we teach you a workshop in astrology, we teach you a workshop in Raja Yoga, and we teach you an introductory workshop in Kashmiri Shaivism. But we still think that without a few years of Hatha Yoga, you will more be a theoretician and a scholar than actually a person who does those things. Second shloka. He says the yogi in Svatmarama himself, after making obeisance to his own guru, which he calls by the name Natha, Natha means Lord, and Tara Michel believes that he could be speaking about Gorakshanatha, who is the first who wrote some of these, Goraksha Shataka, one of the early texts of the Natha tradition, and therefore Goraksha is very well known as a guru. It's like one of the most famous gurus from history. And it could be that he says, Svatmarama, in the first shloka he made pranam to Shiva, as Adinath, and now he says after making obeisance to his own guru, like he asked his guru for permission, or maybe Goraksha explains here the science of Hatha, and he doesn't use yoga. They use very often Hatha Vidya, which is a very important concept. He explains here the science of Hatha Yoga only as a path to Raja Yoga. Two amazing things are said in this shloka. One, he explains the science of Hatha. Hatha, as it is explained in other places as well, is sun and moon. Ha is the sun and Tha is the moon. And therefore he explains the science of sun and moon, of the polarity, of plus and minus. Hatha Yoga is based on yin and yang, on Ha and Ta, on plus and minus. Without that, you don't understand it. So many courses of yoga, they claim to teach Hatha Yoga, they don't even tell you what is plus and minus, because they don't know anything about energy. Because the plus and minus is in the energy, in the prana. And therefore, this is fundamental. This is the science of Hatha. Hatha Vidya is the science of the sun and the moon. That's the essence of it. The name, this name they use it in many shlokas. They don't say Hatha Yoga Vidya. They say Hatha Vidya, the knowledge about Ha and Ta. Very important. And then he says only as a path to Raja Yoga. You see, Svatmarama has the intuition that yoga can be taught to some people to acquire magic powers, to acquire paranormal abilities, or even to do gymnastics for fitness. And he says, I am teaching Hatha Yoga only as a path to Raja Yoga. Like if Hatha Yoga is not spiritual, it doesn't have the meaning of taking you ahead on the path, then Svatmarama is not for that. He uses clearly the word only for that. I verified the Sanskrit text, because some people translate this only and some people don't. And it is only, exclusively for this. He uses the word. Then it's clear, it's the science of polarity, and it is only to reach to the Raja Yoga and therefore to reach to enlightenment. Shloka number 3. First shlokas are easy because there is not much technology to them, but there are so many implications. He says, to those who wander in the darkness. And then the sentence continues lower and says, and are thus ignorant of Raja Yoga. So to those who wander in the darkness, ignorant. and are thus ignorant of Raja Yoga. They don't know about Raja Yoga, where Hatha Yoga is supposed to take you. Svatmarama, with compassion, he uses a word which is kripa, and kripa is more like mercy, mercifully. He says, I felt compassion seeing so many people in ignorance. And he says, moved by kripa, moved by mercy, I offer this lamp of Hatha Yoga, Pradipika, the lamp, the little light on Hatha Yoga. But there is one more sentence included here, which is very meaningful. He says, to those who wander in the darkness due to the multiplicity of divergent opinions. It's wonderful. Wonderful. This is a person who has known the world. I'm going to other countries as well. I'm talking to people. My goodness, the thing which annoys me most is the multitude of smart asses. Everybody knows everything about what Vladimir Putin is planning tomorrow, about why China is doing what it is doing, about yoga, about the subtle universes. Everybody is a smart ass. I don't know if this is also a direct effect of too much marijuana, but the world is full of smart asses. In a document of politics published more than 120 years ago, in the 19th century, some people, a sort of Klaus Schwab economic forum, people like the Bilderbergs and so on, they say, we are going to generate so many diverging opinions by just popularizing one thing and the opposite at the same time, that in the end, the ignorance, completely discouraged by the impossibility to decide on something, they will surrender to us and they will leave the political power and the governance of the world in our hands. It's a politics which is written on paper in a document published 120 something years ago. That it's simply a political thing to publish, either you are Democrat or Republican, left or right, this or that, and you fight so much that eventually people say, man, you don't know who to believe in the end. And then all you do is you give up. The same is happening in the world. Svatmarama says, for those who wander in the darkness due to the multiplicity of divergent opinions. There were smart asses in the 15th century India. Everybody told you something else. You should do this, you should not do that. You should be vegetarian, you should not be a vegetarian. Then people in the end, they were confused and they let go. And because they let go, they were wandering in the darkness. Svatmarama says people wander in the darkness due to the multiplicity of divergent opinions. If you want to keep an open mind and be, it's like that, and it also maybe is like that. You eat shit. You are divergent. You are schizophrenic. I'm telling you directly in the camera, looking in your eyes. You are a fool. Jesus does not have any divergent opinions. Jesus knows one thing and 110% goes for it. There is no doubt, there is no hesitation, there is no arguing about it. Somebody tells, but oh Lord, you forgot to say something about cheese. Jesus says, fuck off, there is no place for cheese in my gospel. It doesn't appear in my gospel. No, God didn't give me to talk about cheese or about this or about that. That means the multiplicity of divergent opinions is an instrument of Maya. Maya, or the devil, as Yogananda put it, hypnotizes people in being confused and running like chicken with their throat cut off, jumping, hopping in circles until they die. That's the sure way. Oh, we have to keep an open mind. No? I remember the Jewish joke with a guy coming to the rabbi. The rabbi was talking to somebody, and two guys come and say, Rabbi, we're arguing. I'm saying that things are like this and like that. And the rabbi say, you are right in a certain way. And the other guy says, but Rabbi, I didn't tell you. I think that things in this method, they are this way, the other way around. At which the rabbi says, you know what, you are also right to a certain extent. To which the witness, the third person who was there, he says, man, you are manipulating them, or what? You told to one of them that he is right, and then you told to the other one of them that he is also right. What is this? At which the rabbi looks at him and says, you are also right in your own way. This is like keeping an open mind. Is there a problem with homosexuality? Is there a problem with eating meat? Is there a problem with, I don't know what other, gender identity, confusion? Is there everybody is right probably. We have to keep an open mind. Not Jesus. Not Svatmarama. These people, they have an open mind, more open than yours and most people, but they are not hypnotized by the multiplicity of divergent opinions. Maybe everybody is right in a certain way. That is bullshit. That go and smoke your marijuana, that's where you go with it. Go and smoke a big joint and everybody will be nice and right. Move to Jamaica and smoke the biggest joint on the planet Earth. That's what it is. If you want to be part of the world of the spiritualists and yogis, as those are different norms. For Buddha, there is no multiplicity of divergent opinions. It's his way or the highway. There is no other way, and so it is in spirituality. Many people are displeased with Agama because here we teach spirituality in an authoritative way. That's always been the path of spirituality. No? You don't like the way of Agama? Go to another guru, go to another school, but even there will be their way or the highway. Everywhere it has to be like this. If you are divergent, you are schizophrenic, you are not focused, you are tricked by the Maya, and you will not drill deep enough to reach God. So he says, to those who wander in the darkness, due to the multiplicity of divergent opinions, those people wander in the darkness and are thus ignorant of Raja Yoga and the truth of the universe, metaphysics. Svatmarama, with compassion or mercy, offers this lamp of Hatha Yoga. Fourth shloka. Matsyendra, who is the beginner of their language. Matsyendra, Goraksha, who is the main disciple of Matsyendra and is the one who wrote. So he's almost more famous than Matsyendra. Matsyendra, Goraksha, they are both of them legendary, really big. Matsyendra, Goraksha, and the others, he uses that thing, etc., by which he means the whole lineage, have known well this science of Hatha, Hatha Vidya. He doesn't say Hatha Yoga, the path of, he says Hatha Vidya, the knowledge of Hatha, the knowledge of sun and the moon. And Yogin Svatmarama, he himself, has learned it by their grace. He uses a beautiful name used in the Shaiva tradition, more than in Kashmiri Shaivas, more in the other Shaiva traditions. He uses the word prasada. Prasada is the grace, the offering to the gods. You give it to the gods and then people eat this prasad, which is sanctified food, consecrated to the gods. So he said, I got it like a prasad, like from Matsyendra Goraksha, it came to me. And then he has 4 shlokas, like in the Gospel of Matthew, where suddenly Matthew mentions the lineage of Jesus Christ. And here he mentions his lineage, or the great yogis which have been part of transmitting this tradition to him, Svatmarama. Some of these yogis are real weird names which nobody has heard about. Some of them are composite names, and some of them are known from other traditions. He says Sri Adinatha Shiva, 1. Matsyendra, that's Matsyendra Nath, the first of the human Nath yogis, the first guru. Sabarananda, Bhairava, Chaurangi, Minas. Most of them are like Mina. Nath is known. And so Goraksha. Goraksha is mentioned only 6 in line because there were other disciples of Matsyendra. But Goraksha is very famous. Virupaksha Bileshaya, Mantana Bhairava Yogi, Siddhi Buddha Kantadi, Korantaka, Surananda, Siddhipata, Charpati. Charpati, for example, is known as one of the 64 mahasiddhas. When you read the lineages of the mahasiddhas preserved by the Buddhist yogis, the blue annals, there you find the name of Charpati, for example. Kaneri Pujyapada, Nityanat, Niranjana, Kapali, Bindunat, Kakachandishvara, Allama, Prabhudeva, Godakol, Godacholi, Tintini, Bhanuki, Naradeva, Kanda Kapalika. All these mahasiddhas, he calls them mahasiddhas, and the truth is that approximately 5 to 10 of them, they appear in the official list of the mahasiddhas. In India, in Nepal, in Tibet, there is a tradition of the 64 mahasiddhas, and there are lists of names. The text has been translated in English. It's called Masters of Enchantment or something like that, and so on, by Keith Dowman, if I remember correctly. And there you have the whole list, all the life stories of the 64. And approximately 5 to 10 of them, they are from this list. All these mahasiddhas, says Svatmarama in the shloka number 9, the last of these, have conquered death. He uses the word kala, which means both death and time. So he says, all these mahasiddhas, they conquered death by the virtue of Hatha Yoga, and they move freely about the universe. For the universe, he uses the word Brahmanda, the egg of Brahma, the egg of the universe, the universal reality. So like in all the planes of the universe, they move wherever they want. So he says, all these mahasiddhas, they have conquered death by virtue of Hatha Yoga. Here he uses the name Hatha Yoga. So he says they conquered death and time by virtue of Hatha Yoga, and because of this, they move freely about the universe. It's a big, big statement. Milarepa had that statement, who said, when I reach to this, I could go wherever in the universe, I could be whatever, I could achieve anything. I was everything from Alpha to Omega. Svatmarama says all the mahasiddhas are his lineage, his forefathers, and he inherited from them this science of Hatha Yoga. So he brings very solid credentials to what he has to teach. When you want, go and take every name, study it, maybe you find the historical references and all that. And then he gives 2 general ideas with which I want to conclude for tonight. There is Shloka 10 and maybe 11, which are like an introduction. Before in Shloka 12, he says you should build yourself a hut like this and like that, and all the rest of the things. But before, he wants to give us 2 more introductory ideas about what is this Hatha Yoga. He again doesn't use the name yoga here. He uses Hatha, the vidya, the knowledge of Hatha. Hatha Yoga, but it's meant like Hatha Yoga, is like a sanctuary. He uses the word mat, like the monasteries of the Buddhists, the ashrams. It's like a sanctuary or a refuge. Hatha Yoga is like a sanctuary for those afflicted by the 3 types of pain, which are spiritual, environmental, and physical. So spiritual pain is the one where you have a bad spiritual karma. Environmental pain is the one produced by other people or by animals or by the environment, pollution and others. And physical pain is when you have a negative karma and that confronts you with physical problems. And he says Hatha Yoga is like a sanctuary for those afflicted by the 3 types of pain. Whatever karma is there, he says Hatha Yoga is the refuge. You can do Hatha Yoga to eliminate the 3 types of pain. And then he says another statement in the same, is like one verse was this, and the second part of the verse, the second line is Hatha Yoga is like the supporting tortoise for those devoted to all forms of yoga. The tortoise is the incarnation as a turtle of Lord Vishnu, and he incarnated to be able to hold Mount Meru when the gods and the demons were churning the ocean of milk. That stick, which was Mount Meru, it had to stay on something because Mount Meru is huge and it was going to break the earth. The ocean could not hold it. And then Lord Vishnu incarnated as Kurma, the turtle. It's the number 3 incarnation of Lord Vishnu or something like this. He incarnated as a turtle and he said, I can hold Mount Meru on my shell, on the back of my shell. So when the gods and the demons did this Vedic act, this Puranic act of churning the ocean, which is a myth, one of the old myths from the Vedic tradition, when they did that, Mount Meru was sitting on a turtle under the water, in the water. There was a turtle, which was a gigantic turtle, which was Lord Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu was upholding the earth so that the churning of the universal ocean can be done. And therefore, it says again, Hatha Yoga is like the supporting tortoise for those devoted to all forms of yoga. People who do all forms of yoga, they will always find help and support in Hatha Yoga. When something is not working, when something is going wrong, when something is getting stuck, even when we talk about manifesting abundance or whatever, there is always a way of breaking that lock. And that is the tortoise which holds everything. The bottom, the rock bottom, the thing which is supporting everything. And that, according to Svatmarama, is Hatha Yoga. You should rely on Hatha Yoga. It's a sanctuary for those afflicted by pain. It is the tortoise of Lord Vishnu for upholding all the forms of yoga. Anything in spirituality can be corrected or saved, maintained with the help of Hatha Yoga. And the last shloka, which I want to read for tonight, which is again giving that injunction which I mentioned, shloka number 11, it says, the science of Hatha, Hatha Vidya, so the science of the sun and the moon, and resulting in Hatha Yoga, the science of Hatha Yoga must be kept very secret. He doesn't use secret. He says top secret, like really secret, must be kept very secret by a yogin that wishes to attain siddhi or perfection. He uses the word siddhi, which means spiritual perfection or paranormal abilities. So he says the science of Hatha Yoga must be kept very secret by a yogin that wishes to obtain siddhi or perfection. And the second line is magnificent. It says, concealed, it, yoga, is efficient. Divulged, it becomes ineffective. It's not a joke. Many people think that in Agama we have some secretomania, that we put things on levels and people have to gradually have some things. It's not. It's the spirit of yoga, which I have learned from the Shastras, which I have learned from my gurus, and it is the way things are working, and I'm giving it further exactly in this way. He doesn't say don't give Hatha Yoga, and he says, I, Svatmarama, because I have compassion, because I have made obeisance to my guru, and he gave me blessing, and because I'm worshipping Lord Shiva, and I feel he is okay with it, I'm writing a little light on Hatha Yoga. Like, you will not be able to learn fully the Hatha Yoga from this, but a little light. You will not be able to learn Hatha Yoga by, if I do 30 satsangs on, because if I do 10 shlokas per evening, then it will take me 30 weeks to do this Hatha Yoga Pradipika if it has 300 shlokas or 400 shlokas. You will not learn Hatha Yoga from me, from this satsang. You will learn Hatha, you will get inspired, you will get a few breakthroughs, but when you will come to a school like Agama and you will do it for 3 years, then you will learn Hatha Yoga. Then you will know what we are talking about. And therefore, he himself says it very clearly. The science of Hatha Yoga must be kept very secret by a yogin that wishes to attain siddhi or perfection. People say, but people are teaching it. Either they are teaching it with permission, with blessing, with consecration, or not. If they are not teaching it with blessing, you have a very big problem. Yoga is not supposed to be taught chaotically. It's supposed to be taught within a certain framework. I personally felt the permission of Lord Shiva, first of all, to teach yoga. And because of that, I teach yoga. And when I have students which are advanced enough to teach, I empower them to teach. I give them empowerment to teach. This is the rule. Otherwise, Svatmarama says the science of Hatha Yoga must be kept very secret by a yogin who wishes to attain siddhi, which again, it means spiritual perfection or certain paranormal abilities, the mahasiddhas or whatever. And he makes it clear in the second half of that shloka. He says, concealed yoga is efficient, divulged, it becomes ineffective. Do you understand what is that yoga becomes ineffective? Do you see what's happening in this world where they do monkey yoga, which is ineffective? It's not really yoga. No? Then you could do as well Swedish massage or I don't know what kind of aerobics. And then you would be very fit and shine and you'll say, I'm doing yoga. That's not yoga. That's exactly the whole point. Thus, Svatmarama is very tough. He says yoga is a refuge for all the types of pain. Yoga is like the turtle which supports all the other forms of yoga. Like you can always come back to Hatha Yoga because it's like the basis of everything. And then he says this science of Hatha Yoga must be kept very secret by a yogin who wishes to attain siddhi. Concealed, it is efficient. Divulged, it becomes ineffective. There are people who told me, let's make a site, a homepage about yoga. I somehow couldn't be part of that. I didn't say no, I didn't say yes. In the end, it just went like a flatulence, it just became nothing. No? Because yoga is not meant to be divulged in this way. But now we have internet, I will try to make it. No, it is available in lectures, in videos and audios, but those have a special regime. They have a special status. They are given to people in a certain order according to the fact that they do practice. And when they practice, then they can move to the next level. So you are going to see that Svatmarama, who gives a little light of Hatha Yoga, he leaves a lot of things unspoken of on purpose. And although I will explain some of those things, I also am incapable to teach you yoga in a satsang. You have to make a course of yoga to be able to really learn it, to practice it, to get the benefits of it. Divulged, yoga becomes ineffective. Ineffective. He doesn't mince with words. He says if it is concealed, it is efficient. And he uses the word virya, efficiency, like in Brahmacharya. Yeah? Concealed, it has virya, it is efficient. And divulged, it has no virya. It is inefficient, which is a very big alarm signal because nobody wants to practice yoga by wasting their time in the life. We have better things to do with our lives and with our time than to waste it with inefficient practice. Therefore, it's a strong introduction. He made a consecration. He told us where this science is coming from. He gave us 2 shlokas about what yoga is and how valuable this Hatha yoga is, and that the mahasiddhas themselves had this knowledge of Hatha Vidya. He tells us at the same time, I'm telling you something very secret here, pay attention, and then he will start with giving us some practical advice. First, about the room in which you do yoga. Yeah? With that, it will start. I think it is enough. We have opened this door. We are entering into the study of Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Next week, if there are no other workshops or other things preventing me from doing, I haven't checked the calendar exactly, then we'll continue with the second satsang, still on the theme of Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Happening in Agama or in the world, such as we have the New Year's retreat with the things thereof. We are approaching Mahashivaratri, the Christmas and New Year retreat, yes. And we have Mahashivaratri in the end of February and others. There may be that I'm interrupting this series to perform some, to offer some satsangs which are answering to the most urgent needs of the moment. But in the big picture, I intend to continue with Hatha Yoga Pradipika in this season to clarify, to make it known to people so that they know what Svatmarama is truly saying about this. Again, I could have commented more because there is a mechanism in this thing that when you keep something secret, it has a power, and when you divulge it, it loses that power and all that. But it's not the time right now. I don't want to split the hair ad infinitum. I just want to make this text available to you, and so you see where did we get this from? Because this, what we do, what we teach in Agama, is coming from such traditions. Enough for tonight. Thank you all for joining. I hope to meet you further in our explanations on Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Enough for tonight.